towards accelerating the achievement of the 2030 agenda and the SDGs, and how to translate the policies into action at the regional and the country level. So today we will be having not only the side of the work that we're doing on the different corporate policies, but also how are we translating this into action. And we're very happy to have many colleagues from the UN system, but also speakers who are online with us, who will also give us a flavor on how this is being applied. So without further ado, let me pass it to you, Excellency, so we could also move ahead with our agenda. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Director, Madam Dima Al-Khatib, resident coordinators, delegates, ladies and gentlemen, both in person and online. Thank you for joining with us this afternoon. I'm quite a stranger to South-South cooperation, quite frankly. Yeah, but in the last few weeks or months, perhaps, I've had the privilege of being associated with the director and her team, who has given us perhaps an introduction to flavor this whole concept of South-South cooperation. In my capacity as the incumbent president of the high-level committee of South-South cooperation, I'm happy to welcome all of you to this event on the sidelines of the high-level political forum on sustainable development that we have been playing out this whole week. At the outset, I thank the United Nations Office of South-South Cooperation and the United Nations Development Cooperation Office for their efforts in getting this meeting together, and putting it together. Distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, the subject area being explored today in this side event is very relevant to these organizations and to us, countries of the global South, on the sidelines of the HLPF, which is aimed at preparing for the Sustainable Development Goals Summit in the September to come. Now, we recall that the Executive Committee chaired by the Secretary General in August of 2020 endorsed the UN system-wide strategy on South-South and triangular cooperation to provide system-wide policy orientation to the United Nations entities to increase the impact of such cooperation and better position the United Nations to coordinate policies and programmatic coordination amongst existing mechanisms. Now, the UNGA resolutions on South-South cooperation, A/RES/76, 2021, which you're all familiar with, whilst endorsing the Buenos Aires outcome document in resolution 76/185, encourages the United Nations entities to support developing countries in integrating development cooperation initiatives, thereby giving a strong mandate to the United Nations system and regional commissions to implement a strategy at regional and country levels. Now, today, in keeping with that mandate, the United Nations Office of South-South Cooperation will shortly present to us guidelines to be issued to the United Nations country teams and regional UN development entities on the integration of South-South cooperation into the United Nations Sustainable Development Corporation's framework and regional collaborative frameworks. Now, these guidelines have been prepared through, as you know, a consultative process. Ladies and gentlemen, we have examples of this in India, in Brazil, in South Africa. We have several other examples, such as the China Horn of Africa initiative and the UNCTs in the Philippines and Thailand. Ladies and gentlemen, at a time when member states have gathered to discuss the ways and means of rescuing the SDGs and undertaking firm commitments domestically and globally, it is pertinent that we incorporate into the discussion the ways and means of injecting more strongly the methods of harnessing South-South and triangular cooperation into these efforts, particularly into the United Nations systems. So this side event is also a response to the interest expressed at the recently held 21st session of the High-Level Committee of South-South Cooperation in May and June 2023 by member states to increase the visibility of the impact and importance of South-South and triangular cooperation. So towards this end, we have with us today speakers from the resident coordinator system of the United Nations who will share examples of the incorporation of such an approach in development cooperation and its potential to support the work of the United Nations system as a whole in its work with national governments. So through these speakers and ensuring and the ensuing discussions at this side event, it is hoped to demonstrate the potential for the United Nations system to support government endeavors where they perceive South-South and triangular cooperation to be effective in achieving their development goals and enhance the understanding of the contribution of such cooperation. So we will hear from them. Resident coordinators stationed in India, Mr. Shram Bishop, and in Saudi Arabia, Dr. Rita Columbia, and also from the current senior advisor on small island developed states to the UNOPS. To begin with, therefore, without further ado, I invite our director, Madam Dima, to take the floor. The floor is yours, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Excellency, for your insights and for your, expressed importance on the relevance of these guidelines that we will be discussing today, but most importantly, how we are going to move that forward at the regional and the country level. So colleagues, again, welcome. Thank you for being with us today. South-South and triangular cooperation, as you all know, is anchored as a key means of implementation of the 2030 Agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals, and SDG 17 focuses on enhancing the North-South, the South-South, and triangular regional and international cooperation, as well as access to science, technology, innovation, knowledge sharing, and among other sectors of importance to the countries of the South. The global crisis or the poly-crisis that we are facing for the past 3 years have given us a thrust to developing countries to engage in robust South-South cooperation towards recovery from the pandemic and for building forward better to eradicate poverty, achieve the SDGs, but also the collective vision, as His Excellency was mentioning, that is set out in the BAPA outcome document has been demonstrated in numerous South-South cooperation initiatives of government, of private sector, of civil society, and international organizations. This was reaffirmed during the high-level committee meeting on South-South cooperation that was held last month, and the importance of the role of the UN entities has been also brought to the table as a key element to really anchor South-South at triangular cooperation at the national level and also at the regional level. As the focal point for promoting and facilitating South-South and Triangular cooperation globally and within the UN system, we as an Office for South-South Cooperation provide advisory and technical support to member states to strengthen their South-South and Triangular cooperation, also the institutional ecosystems, and support UN partners for the integration of the South-South and Triangular cooperation in their work. Our offer to member states, the UN system, and partners includes also knowledge sharing and exchange of good practices through our South-South Galaxy platform, publications, several publications, policy dialogues, Global South-South Development Expo that is held every 2 years, but also the South-South Managed Trust Funds, among others. And to encourage developing countries to engage in South-South and Triangular cooperation, and support the institutionalization of South-South, its policy framework, implementation, and monitoring, we convene also what we call a forum of director generals of national development cooperation agencies. And this forum, along with other platforms and mechanisms, promote more and better South-South and Triangular cooperation among multiple stakeholders. We are also looking into ways on how to activate that forum further, given the importance of within, but also inter-country and inter-regional collaboration. The office manages, as I mentioned, a knowledge sharing and partnership brokering platform called the South-South Galaxy, also connecting and linking existing South-South and Triangular knowledge sharing platform aligned with the SDGs. It presents a curated digital repository of over 800 good practices. And this is an invitation for all to make good use of it, but also an invitation to all, if you would like to showcase your best practices, this is a platform that really provides you with the outreach to do that under the branding of South-South and Triangular cooperation. We do also, as I mentioned, in addition to this platform, convene what we call the Global South-South Development Expo, whereby we showcased evidence-based successful development solutions and initiatives in collaborations with the UN agencies, but also with all the member states. This will be taking place hopefully next year, and we are also open to ideas and to thinking beyond the box to see how we can showcase further South-South collaboration across entities, but also across the member states. We do, as I mentioned, manage several trust funds and programs that facilitate the collaboration and piloting of South-South initiatives and innovations with implementation support provided by the UN system. And these are very important because they provide South-South cooperation solutions that are scalable, that are replicable, either within countries or also across countries. I will not repeat what His Excellency mentioned about the report of the Secretary General that was presented during the high-level committee, whereby there was a lot of stress and importance on the role of the UN entities in terms of advancing South-South collaboration at the regional and the national level. Let me zoom into the UN country teams. We have been leading, as UN Office for South-South Cooperation, the elaboration of draft guidelines for the UN country teams and regional level entities to support them in the mainstreaming of South-South and Triangle cooperation in their United Nations Sustainable Development Cooperation frameworks at the country and the UN planning monitoring instruments at the regional level. The draft guidelines were prepared, as mentioned, also through a consultative process involving members of the UN interagency mechanism on South-South collaboration that we also do manage and coordinate, but also the UN Development Cooperation Office and the regional commissions, and of course, some champion resident coordinators. And we do hope that also under the leadership of the DCO, the UN Development Cooperation Office, and the resident coordinators, once these guidelines are finalized, we are in the last mile, as we say, the rollout will demonstrate the potential of the UN system to work together to support the government endeavors where South-South and Triangle cooperation is considered suitable, and effective, but it will also enhance the contribution of South-South cooperation to development. And it will help to address the cross-border issues articulated by member states at different global forums. We do, rely on these guidelines to bring some, transformation at the national level and at the regional level by anchoring South-South into the different planning mechanism. It's also important to mention that they will be also, posted on our different networks, different platforms to make the best use out of that, but also to make sure that we connect whatever comes out from the work that we do within the trust fund work to feed into the different guidelines and use them as examples, but also to use the examples of what other UN entities have been doing and showcasing, which I think, and I believe that the UN system has been doing a lot, but it might not be branded as South-South, but that gives us also the opportunity to think further into that. And we're very happy to work together with a lot of the agencies, and I would like to name some of them: UNFPA, UNDP, FAO. We have also with us IAEA. We just had a fantastic side event on Monday, and more to come, hopefully. UNIDO is also one of the agencies with whom we are collaborating on that front. So today's event is an opportunity whereby we can discuss the ways and means to further strengthen the ongoing efforts of the system at the regional and the national level for South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation as a modality to accelerate progress. It's also a good opportunity to learn, as His Excellency was saying, from the colleagues who are joining us online, and this is also extremely important because they are coming from, different countries. So we have the example of India, which is a lead country in terms of advancing and supporting South-South cooperation. We are very happy to also have one of the trust funds is the UN India Trust Fund that we are managing, whereby we are extracting a lot of fantastic examples. So we will hear from the resident coordinator there. We have the example of Saudi Arabia, who has, South-South cooperation as part of its mantra and its international development policy. So we will hear also today from the resident coordinator at interim, who is with us. And we will hear also from a former resident coordinator who used to manage a SIDS country, also in terms of a different context and the challenges there. So with this, and without further ado, I also want to pass the floor to my colleague Dennis, who will very shortly present to you what these guidelines are all about, so you also get a sense of what is this, the work that is ahead of us. So Dennis, let me pass it to you. Do you want to use a mic? Yeah. You're fine? Okay.
Excellency Director, is this too loud?
It's fine.
It's fine. Thank you very much for this opportunity to talk about the guidelines. I must say that you have said a lot of what I was going to say, and I will therefore abbreviate my presentation accordingly. Can we go to the next slide, please? I know that we have a mixed group of people. Some of you are very conversant with the guidelines, but for some of you, it may be the first time that you are hearing about them. So I thought the best way to approach this was to ask questions and try to answer them. And so we're going to look at the guidelines. What are they? Why are they required? And the process has already been touched upon. The expected results from the guidelines. And lastly, we're going to talk about the current status and the way forward relating to the guidelines. Next, please. So as an introduction, I just wanted to maybe reiterate what has been said about the genius of the people who put together the BAPA Buenos Aires Plan of Action in 1978. I think their vision to entrust the UN system to help them implement their idea of technical cooperation among developing countries was very important. And they entrusted it in the high-level committee. And today, the guidelines that we're talking about, an example of this process of adjusting South-South and triangular cooperation to the current conditions. So let's just move on and see how this is being done. The next question that we wanted to look at was, what are the guidelines? So they constitute of about 5 areas. The first part, of course, is that we look at the modalities of South-South and triangular cooperation. Look at the guiding principles, because we always say that there's a lot of projects that we did. However, if we didn't have the guiding principles of South-South and triangular cooperation, it is not a South-South and triangular cooperation project. And secondly, we also look at the definitions of South-South and triangular cooperation. And finally, we also explore the role of the UN system in helping member states implement South-South and triangular cooperation. The second part looks at the integrating process of South-South and triangular cooperation into the planning, programming, and implementing activities of the UN development system at the country level and the regional level. And the way that it has been done is to look at the various instruments and closely looking at them, look at the entry points for identifying the opportunities for South-South and triangular cooperation and how to do it. What we have subsequently seen, though, is that even though there are these very detailed steps of doing it, a lot of people are coming back to us and saying, what is important for us is to get some examples of how it was done elsewhere, because that provides us guidance. And so the tools are being sharpened towards that direction, giving more examples of how to do it. The other part is knowledge and tools, knowledge networks and platforms and case studies. In terms of the platforms, a good example, of course, has been referred to. That's the South-South Galaxy, which we have here. And in the South-South Galaxy, you can find many, many case studies. And so referring to the need for people to see how it has been done, there are those examples. But as we finalize the guidelines, we'll be looking at more examples, particularly from the partners in the UN system. The fourth part is on the financing of South-South and triangular cooperation. And already His Excellency and the Director have referred to some of the trust funds that we have are managed by the UN Office for South-South Cooperation, including the India, Brazil, South Africa, including the India UN. But also we have projects under the South-South Trust Fund, including cooperation with the Republic of Korea and China. So all these, when you go to the guidelines, you're going to see them and you see the processes of engaging with them. In addition to that, of course, we refer to other trust funds, other sources for South-South cooperation from outside of the UN Office for South-South Cooperation in other UN agencies, in other foundations and other means of financing development cooperation. Last but not least, it used to be that monitoring and evaluation were not so important for South-South cooperation, but recently, most of you will know about the efforts to measure South-South cooperation. This will help in evaluating the input of the developing countries on South-South cooperation, but also it helps us to tell a story about what is South-South cooperation achieving? How is South-South cooperation contributing to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals? So those are about the 5 components that we have. We don't have a chance to look into more depth at every one of them, but I think I hope that this suffices to just give you a picture of what we have as the guidelines. Next, please. So the next question is why the guidelines, and this has partly been answered as well. Guidelines are a response to changes in the UN, which took place after the adoption of the international agreed Sustainable Development Agenda in 2015. Following that agenda, the UN system at the country level and at the regional level was reconfigured. And even though we have had some kind of guidelines on South-South and triangular cooperation, we needed to look at them in the context of the how the UN development system looks at these levels. It also followed the UN system-wide strategy on South-South and triangular cooperation and its action plan. So when you do some things, you always realize maybe you will need to take one more step forward. And so after the strategy and its action plan, the next step was to make these guidelines accessible to people. And that's why, to make the what is presented in the strategy and the action plan accessible to people. And that was through the guidelines. The guidelines also will help to integrate South-South and triangular cooperation in the work of UN country teams at the country level and for the UN system at the regional level. It will help the UN system to systematically respond to member states' requests. I think this is a very important aspect in that right now it's not predictable how in each location the UN system is going to respond to a request by the country that they are working in. But we hope that with these guidelines, it can at least provide a basis for that response. The last thing I wanted to mention here is that it will also develop the capacities of the people who work for the UN system at regional and country level to be able to make that response. Next, please. I will not spend much time on this because it's already been spelled out by the previous speakers. But the UN Office for South-South Cooperation has had the leadership in trying to develop these guidelines. Based on the system-wide strategy, the action plan, and going into the guidelines. We have had the assistance of the UN Development Coordination Office, who have been very good in ensuring consistency with the change processes, with the policies and the tools for planning and programming. We have an interagency mechanism consisting of over 40 UN entities, and many of them have contributed to the putting together of the guidelines based on their experience, and some of them have had extensive capacity building in South-South cooperation. So going forward, we'll be incorporating more of that. Last but not least, we talk about the main implementers, the UN resident coordinators in the countries, and the UN regional commissions at the regional level, as well as the regional programs of the various UN entities. So these are also involved in providing inputs. In terms of the resident coordinators, there was a selected group of resident coordinators who actually helped in putting together this process of guidelines. Next, please. The expected results, they stem from what I said are some of the issues that needed to be addressed. South-South and triangular cooperation will be mainstreamed in the work of the UN system at country and regional level. There will be increased responsiveness to member states. Hopefully, we've developed some indicators to follow that, to see that there will be an impact. And we hope also that there will be better results through South-South and triangular cooperation, helping towards achieving the sustainable development goals. Next, please. And so this is the timeline that we have right now. We have a pretty good compilation of the guidelines. However, there are some things that we still need to do. And this is to incorporate comments from all partners. We're still in the process of receiving those comments. And once we have incorporated those comments and finalized the guidelines, we'll go into the next stage, which is developing learning tools. And with that, we actually are going to a point that I mentioned, to enable people to have access to go directly to what they want exactly out of the guidelines. We are working with the UN System Staff College and UN partners, discussing on how we can develop e-modules that can be useful at one level for one person to be able to sit down and learn about South-South cooperation, about how it is funded and so on. But at another level also for trainers, people who are going to be able to reach out even more people. So we believe that with that, we'll be able to answer a lot of the questions. For those of us who work, we see that every time we sit with people, they'll say, I may never have heard anything about South-South cooperation, or I know very little about South-South cooperation. So we are hoping that this expansion can help address this issue. And then in the fourth quarter, we actually commence e-module development for individual staff training and for training of trainers. And we hope that beginning of 2024, we will roll out and start to manage this process of reaching out to the implementers. Next, please. And so I wanted to end with this, that we are faced with many challenges, as has been said. And the high-level committee that we just had called on us, all of us, to accelerate South-South and triangular cooperation. We therefore hope that with this event, with this expose of what we're trying to do with the guidelines, that you can join us to bring the guidelines to trainers and practitioners as soon as possible. Maybe that will help to accelerate and scale up South-South and triangular cooperation. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Dennis. Thank you. I would take your permission. I'm going to change a little bit the agenda because we do have some colleagues online and I'm conscious of the time difference. So I'm going to start by inviting the colleague, the RC at interim, who is in Saudi Arabia. Rita, are you with us?
Yes.
Yes.
Hello, everybody.
Do you allow me to start with you?
Absolutely, Dima. Thank you so much.
First, thank you very much for joining us today on a short notice, but we were very keen to showcase the good work and the transformation that is happening in Saudi Arabia. We know that Saudi Arabia, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, has been one of the pioneer countries in addressing South-South cooperation as part of its foreign development policy. And with the Vision 2030, there is an increased scope for South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation. How do you, as the resident coordinator in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, how do you see the role of the UN system in support of the Kingdom's vision in this respect? Over to you.
Thank you, Dima. Good afternoon, everybody, Your Excellency. Dima, it's great to see you again. And dear colleagues and partners who are in the room, good afternoon and greetings from Riyadh. So Dima, since I have 10 minutes, before I speak about UN specifically, can I just acknowledge the experience that Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has in South-South triangular cooperations, though it might not be called that at the time when they started working in this field. It wasn't called this way because the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia since 1950s has been providing development assistance to countries in need. And they also played an important role in the landmark Buenos Aires Plan of Action of 1978 that committed countries to promote the technical cooperation as the key strategy in responding to development needs. And I think that's kind of the starting point when already the kingdom was a big player in this area of, in the challenging area, actually, exchanging the knowledge, building the capacities of those who needed it for their development. And today, the kingdom is one of the largest southern provider of ODA at the global level, playing, and the role of the kingdom is growing in supporting developing countries and countries in humanitarian crisis through various agencies, government organizations, and multilateral partners. So just to, I know that everybody who is sitting in the room probably know that Saudi Arabia is an active member and the host of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, the Gulf Cooperation Council, Islamic Development Bank, but also one of the founding members of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, which is one of the pioneers in innovative financing, so for sustainable development. Well, I should say that since with this background that Saudi Arabia is well placed to be engaged in South-South Triangular Cooperation, both as a provider and participants in many areas. So we are looking at innovations and digitalization, agriculture and water management, renewable energies, green economy. So it seems like everything what we witness today is happening in Saudi Arabia. And as a G20 country, also as the host of G20 3 years ago, there was a reaffirmment of the long-standing commitment to South-South cooperation by the kingdom, emphasizing the importance first of the sustainable financing, but also the role of the partnerships. The partnerships at global level, at the regional level, and that's what I also echo what you're saying, that there is importance of regional institutions as well to strengthen the South-South Triangular Cooperation and the network that includes private sector, government, different parties, civil society organizations, and NGOs. So I just want to say, when we talk about DCO in KSA, sometimes we have our own DCO, which is a digital cooperation organization. And that's one of the examples of the new platform for South-South cooperation, not only in the region, but globally. This agency, it's a multilateral agency. It was established by the kingdom 3 years ago to keep the momentum of the accelerating digital economy. And right now, DCO, and don't confuse it with UN DCO, it has 13 members for today. And all of these countries, they're already in that network of knowledge sharing, best practices sharing, recognizing the importance of the digital economy and, well, also contributing to the development in this field. So today, when we speak about UN, I'm coming slowly to the role of UN and UNCT in the kingdom. So we're working very closely with new partners, with the private sector, and for example, with this organization as DCO, exploring further cooperation to support and accelerate this platform for expanding the impact of the digital compact and reducing the digital divide, not only in the country, but across the world. So if we speak, you gave me a little bit tough task to speak about innovative financing and capacity development. So within our cooperation framework, the South-South Triangular Cooperation is a center point, is really strongly addressed. However, when I speak about innovation financing, we're, as UN team, we're still at the beginning of the journey. But the country itself, it has the experience. And if you just allow me a few examples, for example, microfinance innovation banks that were established in 9 countries with support of ACT Fund. And one of these banks works in Sudan, and even currently within this very difficult situation in Sudan, the bank continues its operation and providing support to farmers, to people living in remote areas. Another example is the financing, innovative financing offered by the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank. It covers more than 35 countries within Asian region, but also outside of this region. And the third one that I want to talk about is Islamic financing for sustainable development. And this Islamic finance, that's exactly what UNCT has been engaged with the Ministry of Economy and Planning. In 2021, the Office of the Resident Coordinator, UNDP, and Islamic Development Bank, with the leadership of the ministry, researched the potential of AUCAF. And for many of us who may not know what it is, it's one of the models or mechanisms of Islamic funding. So, and today, in 2020, the kingdom has more than 100,000 institutions within the AUCAF. And you can imagine what a large source of financing it has. So, only for the South Division 2030 that Tima, you mentioned, the AUCAF spent about 7 billion rial. And for today rate, it's 3.5 rial for $1. You can do the calculation. And about 6 billion rial was invested towards the SDGs aligned fields within the country. So basically, the research findings that we did showed that AUCAF contribution to SDG can be enhanced tremendously if we, as UN, together with the government, help AUCAF to build its capacity to greater impact and align the institutions with the international standards and guidelines in the matter of coordination, regulations, impact assessment, monitoring, learning, and of course, building the South-South triangular cooperation as the centerpiece within their development support. As I mentioned before, the South-South triangular cooperation is a cross-cutting issue in our current common country strategic, sustainable development cooperation framework. But even before the current cooperation framework, UN was very much engaged in supporting the government of the kingdom with South-South cooperation. I want to highlight UNDP, though we have other examples, but the examples with UNDP was, I think, at the ground scale, at the large scale. The agency provided technical support in public diplomacy, international youth dialogue. And that was the first opportunity for Saudi youth, it was a few years ago, to exchange knowledge with their peers from Brazil, India, Korea, China, and Tanzania. So it's quite a range of countries. And of course, after these exchanges, there were a boost of youth participation in ICT for development, their interest in renewable energy. There are many startups related to that, biodiversity, medical research, e-learning, and smart cities. So, of course, within this context right now, what we are looking at more structured and system-wide approach to enhance and strengthen our support as UN for Saudi Arabia's engagement in South-South and triangular cooperation. So, as UN overall, we promote an investment in capacity development throughout the field of innovations, technologies, digitalization, and making sure that these capacities can be replicated in other in different country contexts. So that's just a few points. I have 1 minute, right? 1 minute? Okay, thank you. So just one point, it was very important for us, if we speak about the strategically how we positioning the South-South cooperation within our programs, it was very important to have a very strong evidence-based, and that's what we did through the common country analysis. It was a strongly researched new generation of CCA, and it provided, again, enhanced recommendations that included also South-South. Also, the second point that was important for us, it's a solid partnership strategy. So, and that's, I want to bring just example of UN Global Compact for Private Business, which now by itself engaged in South-South cooperation and North-South cooperation with other private businesses and governments as well. The most recent one was with Norway. And the last one, so to be very focused, we are focusing our support on specific areas where the kingdom, where the government of KSA has commitment to become regional and global leader. So, and that's again, that includes many areas, but mainly it's innovation, digitalization, financing, and also we are talking about humanitarian diplomacy as well. Just taking recent example of Sudan and how it was handled by the kingdom. In conclusion, Dima, I want you to smile. So very important. Of course, capacity of country team, UN country team is extremely important. Dedication of all agencies, very important to South-South cooperation. But plus to that, I really want to see us working together on building regional leadership for South-South triangular cooperation. And we have, as DCO has a very good network of regional offices, and they have to be part of this conversation and also solution. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rita. Thank you for this very...
So I tried to speak fast. I hope you got the message.
You got all the messages. It's a very rich intervention. Thank you for giving us, you know, a flavor of what the kingdom is going undertakings, but also what the UN system is supporting with. It's quite impressive, and definitely there will be always more time to better understand and delve deeper into that. But you touched on many key areas, whether innovation financing, microfinance, but also I want to underpin the area of youth, because youth are an extremely powerful agent for all the countries of the South, and we need to think about how we can empower them in that process. And I think the UN system has a key role to play with all its different agencies. There are some agencies who are mandated. I see UNFPA with us here also, and this is also an area that they are taking care of. Thank you very much, Rita. And there might be questions as we open the floor after the different interventions. But let me pass it also to, and I see also our colleague from the Kingdom's permanent representation. Thank you for being with us today. What I also wanted to note is that the Kingdom has a very interesting, talking about innovation booth at the UN. I invite you all to go and see it, about the line, which is a huge investment in the middle of the desert, using renewable energy. Phenomenal. I mean, this is something that I would like to go and see and learn more from them. All right, we do have also a very good intervention, unfortunately not live, but recorded from India country office. The resident coordinator of India, Shambi Sharp, has provided us with a recorded message, also shedding the light on how the UN system in India and how India as a country is leading on South-South cooperation. So if you allow us, we will play the short video. With the recorded message, also shedding the light on how the UN system
to the organizers of this important discussion, the permanent mission
is leading on South-South cooperation. So if you allow us, we will play the short video.
To the organizers of this important discussion, the permanent mission of Sri Lanka to the UN, the co-organizers, the UN Office for South-South Cooperation and the UN Development Cooperation Office, collaborating UN agencies, the Government of India representatives, and all other dignitaries, I wish you a very warm namaste from New Delhi on behalf of the UN in India. As a consistent advocate for the concerns and aspirations of the Global South, India has long played an important and growing role in international development. And as a leading proponent for South-South and triangular cooperation, in today's time of polycrisis, this leadership is perhaps more important than ever. Now the fifth largest and one of the fastest growing economies, India has emerged as a major actor in international cooperation, with South-South and triangular efforts expanding markedly in recent years. Inspired by the spirit of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the world is one family, India's international development cooperation is demand-based, with close alignment with the priorities of those partner countries it is serving, while building resilience in the face of crises. For example, India reached out to 150 countries to supply medicines, vaccines, and medical equipment during the COVID pandemic, including donations to the UN COVAX facility and UN peacekeepers. And India has extended more than 300 concessional lines of credit for developmental finance to many countries facing debt distress, especially in South Asia and Africa. India's South-South cooperation has long emphasized technical cooperation, knowledge transfers, and capacity building, including via the Indian Technical and Economic Cooperation Program, ITEC, which trains civil servants from the Global South. The UN in India, including the Resident Coordinator's Office, has been honored to increasingly partner in some of these efforts. India's support also focuses on enhanced multilateral initiatives to address the climate crisis, for example, with UN partnership, such as the Coalition for Disaster Resilient Infrastructure and the International Solar Alliance. The groundbreaking $150 million India-UN Development Partnership Fund, established by the Government of India together with the Office for South-South Cooperation, as well as the India-Brazil-South Africa Fund, are more examples of multilateral leadership with UN partnership. And to support these priorities from the ground, our new Government of India UN Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework, a partnership pact for the next 5 years, for the first time includes South-South cooperation as a key engagement priority. The UN country team here will bring additional added value, working together with NITI Aayog and government ministries, including the Ministry of External Affairs, to help identify and codify emerging Indian development best practice, and to share that knowledge at the international level. This is a true two-way partnership between India and the UN system, working hand in hand with the Office for South-South Cooperation, as well as UN system colleagues in partner third countries. We therefore welcome the new guidelines for mainstreaming South-South and triangular cooperation in both country level and regional frameworks, which is very much the spirit of our new cooperation framework and can help add significant value for delivering as one UN family. This also aligns with India's leadership in helping develop a conceptual framework for measuring South-South cooperation and the relevant SDG indicator. Now, India is also using the G20 presidency as a platform to amplify the voices and priorities of the Global South and to share its own good practices that can benefit other developing nations, such as vaccine technologies, digital public goods, women-led development, financial inclusion, the Indian model of SDG localization, and the Lifestyles for Environment or LIFE nudging framework, which the UN Secretary General Guterres helped launch with Prime Minister Modi here last October. And the timing is critical. Sharing these best practices and having achieved agreement on a new G20 SDG Acceleration Action Plan will provide much needed momentum as we head into the SDG Summit in New York, just days after the G20 Summit in Delhi. Dear colleagues, India's G20 presidency has been so aligned with the 2030 agenda, I like to call it an SDG 20, leadership we need at this challenging moment in history to build partnerships and find collective solutions with South-South and triangular cooperation at the core, playing a greater role than ever before. Thank you very much. Bahut dhanyavad.
Let me thank also Shombi for his intervention and really providing insights for the leadership of India. India has been a long-term partner also for the UN Office for South-South Cooperation on different levels, but also on the trust funds level. We have a major UN India trust fund through which we are jointly with the UN system implementing impactful projects, scalable projects, demonstration projects that are feeding into our support to policies, but also into our knowledge platforms. Also, India has been joining forces with South Africa and Brazil for the IPSA Trust Fund, with whom we have a roller up here, so you could also know more about it. We do have another former resident coordinator who is with us also online, Mrs. Simona Marinesco. She's the former UN resident coordinator for Samoa, Cook Island, Niue, and Tokelau, multi-country, and who is currently a UNOPS senior advisor. Thank you, Simona, for being with us today. You have worked as a resident coordinator for one of those countries or multi-countries that are facing multiple challenges, right? And with many also transboundary issues and limited capacities to institutionalize South-South and Triangle cooperation. Can you share with us your insights from that experience, but also to dwell, on the UN support past, but also the potential in terms of mainstreaming and anchoring? Let me pass it to you, Simona, and thank you again for joining us.
Thank you so much, Director Al-Khatib and Excellency Ambassador Peter Mohan Maitri Pieris. Excellencies, colleagues, great honor to be able to join you today. In the interest of time, I will go briefly through what has happened over the last 6 years in the Pacific, out of which 5.5 I served as UN resident coordinator, but also share with you what is ahead of us as small island developing states are heading towards the 4th conference and the adoption of the next 10-year agenda. I serve in this capacity for all of the small island developing states. UNOPS kindly agreed to provide this support to the process. And there is a lot happening that would give a great avenue to South-South cooperation. I will start by saying, Dima, that on behalf of the Pacific RCs, I'm very, very thankful to the office, the UN Office of South-South Cooperation, the great support we've received across the countries in the Pacific and in Asia Pacific more broadly. An office that doesn't have a big budget, but a lot of passion and great leadership of resources put forward as trust funds, as you mentioned earlier. Just very briefly, let me share the fact that the trust funds that UN Office for South-South Cooperation is managing provided resources in various areas across the Pacific. As I mentioned, in the response to COVID-19, in Kiribati, Nauru, Palau, Solomon Islands, and Tonga. In Palau, with very concrete equipment delivery to the community health centers, with air purifying respirators and a heavy duty truck. That may sound small, but for small island developing states that are so isolated, so remote, this is a great support. We work together also with the UN Office for South-South Cooperation within the framework of the India-UN Development Partnership Fund, one of the trust funds that I'm going to focus mostly on, in the Federated States of Micronesia, where we provided support with those resources to women's participation in management of water and sanitation, as well as in Solomon Islands, assisting the Ministry of Health in water sanitation and the hygiene items to support the COVID-19 response. But let me move into Tuvalu, for instance, where the fund provided resources for the solar energy home systems across the communities, adding freezers and also telecommunication systems powered by photovoltaic solar resources, working closely with the government. So those are very small governments. So South-South cooperation brings brings a lot of strength to their efforts to move out of crisis and address the SDGs. In Tonga, of course, COVID-19 response, but also in the recovery after the cyclone. As you mentioned, Dima, the Pacific is one of the most vulnerable area of small island developing states, has multiple cyclones every cyclone season, named cyclones that affect livelihoods profoundly. But within this fund, a program that I had the opportunity to oversee directly, is the very transformative Knowledge Society initiative in Samoa. When we wanted to promote South-South cooperation through our Pacific strategy at the time and link to the country's priorities, we had a good analysis as to what the most transformative areas would be. And we identified the relevance of transforming Samoa into a knowledge society towards progress against all the SDGs, as all the SDGs are knowledge intensive, and the country that does not have adequate resources and digital resources factored in would not be able to make a rapid, sustainable progress and would not be able to prepare younger generations for the future. You made reference to youth extensively. So yes, that is what we thought would be most transformative. So with the UN Office support, not only to review the program, but also to help us manage the resources coming from the India UN Development Partnership Fund, $1 million, we developed a knowledge society platform in Samoa with multiple resources, the first of its kind digital library to give access to people across the country to knowledge, to books, to textbooks, to scientific journals, to all the resources that people need to actually strengthen their skills and relevance to the labor market, moving into a lifelong learning platform that is missing in small island developing states. Most of the people in the Pacific, once they get a diploma, think that they are ready to perform in the labor market for life. The concept of lifelong learning has been quite new to some of the very remote Pacific islands. So we moved into a platform for lifelong learning where we had great support from UNESCO. This is a UNDP UNESCO program, but UNESCO with its leadership of Knowledge Society, an open research platform where we help the National University of Samoa to engage with other universities on relevant research, and across the board promoting the concept of a right, fundamental right for access to public information, and ensuring that people know that the exercise of this right is so important to their lives. So I'm particularly thankful for this opportunity that we had to work together. And as we speak about South-South cooperation, I need to put on the record that while those resources had support from various countries, we did have constant engagement with India as the funding party on training and data management and working closely with the Management Development Institute of India. And we had South-South exchanges with the University of South Pacific countries that form the Council of the University. So I can go on for that forever, but the library is called SADIL, and you can have, I'm sure the access could be provided. It's extremely resourceful, and within the package, we also created a digital resource for farmers. It's called AgriTouch, so that farmers can make more sustainable use of their farming resources. Very briefly, I will mention that we also work with IPSA in the Pacific. We had a good project in Kiribati on development of the coconut sector, smallholder farmers, and also on the Perez Guerrero Trust Fund for South-South cooperation, where 3 countries, members of the G77, could receive resources for specific areas, primarily food and agriculture, consulting services and training, trade, information exchange. So thank you very much for that. Allow me very briefly, as I aim to close these remarks in the interest of time, to mention that seeds are ready for another 10-year agenda. So we are closing the Samoa pathway. We start in a few days in Mauritius, the regional consultations for the ACE region, and then we'll move to the Caribbean and then the Pacific and then the global consultations. We have come to the conclusion of a partnership with the Public Foundation and the family offices for sustainable development. The family offices, the family trusts are, you know, the wealthiest families that have come together to support the implementation of the SDGs under the UN auspices. And many of them are actually trusts from developing countries. We can discuss a lot about that. So the Public Foundation and the family offices for sustainable development put resources for a center of excellence for small island developing states. It will be focused on data management and technology, considering how important data is in geospatial data for ocean management, for the entire climate adaptation, loss and damage, if you wish, area, but also expanding on debt management, on other areas, investment-ready initiatives on blue financing and other areas of relevance to seeds. We invite the UN office, we also are happy to inform the high-level committee on South-South cooperation ambassador that this center of excellence is an opportunity to bring more knowledge of South-South cooperation, the guidelines, and generate more dynamic into that space. There is a lot happening, but it's not labeled as South-South, as both Dima and Dennis mentioned. There is moving forward, we need to be a little bit more systematic, more intentional on South-South cooperation, understanding that seeds have very little time. And in seeds, with little money, we can make a difference. And again, we are all committed to ensuring that we share a future in safety and security for all people. So seeds are very vulnerable. So kindly join us in this Center of Excellence. There will be a presentation next week on 18th of July at the Alliance of Small Island States of the main concept. The partners will be presenting. But again, we have a few months. The actual launch of the center will be at the 4th Conference of Seeds next year in Antigua and Barbuda on 27th of May to 1st of June. Thank you very much indeed, much gratitude for everything that you're doing. Again, we and myself, together with my colleagues working in small island developing states, look forward to seeing more cooperation, genuine, durable partnerships are what take seeds to a safer future. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Simona. This is also a good illustration of the leadership of the UN system, but also the commitment and the enthusiasm. Simona, thank you very much for sharing with us all of this information, but also, you know, the impact of no matter how catalytic the support is, it really creates a momentum and it really provides support to advancing the development in the countries. And yes, a Center of Excellence, we take note of that. As you know, I mean, in addition to the Galaxy platform, this office manages another platform which is extremely important called the Global Thinkers, which is a network of think tanks at the national and the regional level with the purpose of advancing research for development and working towards the intra-regional collaboration on research. And this is an initiative that we have with UNDP, and we hope to continue and enlarge the partnership beyond that.
Dima, if I may, you mentioned something important. So the Global Thinkers platform is something that the UN Office for South-South Cooperation is managing. I saw Shams in the room, one of the colleagues who was pioneering the design of the platform. So great memories of that time. Yes, that's what we need. We need more dialogues of peers and of people who have great ideas from the South. Thank you.
That's fantastic. And also important to note that with the upcoming landlocked conference and SIDS conference, that's also an opportunity to bring to the table, the Center of Excellence. Before I open it to hearing your questions, if there are any questions, I want to pass a question to Ambassador Mohan Maithiri Pierce, if you allow me, Ambassador. So one of the areas that you emphasized in your leadership of the high-level committee in addressing the issue of debt, the debt relief in developing countries. And I'd like to hear from you, do you envisage a stronger role for South-South cooperation in debt relief and restructuring? Sri Lanka has been recently working with the UN system and the South Center on this issue. If you could share with us some highlights, things that we can, some of the lessons learned for replicability and to learn from that, we would be grateful.
Yes. Well, that's not an easy one to answer, but I'll try and endeavor to answer it as best as I could. Dima, it is no secret that the global economic governance has not kept pace with changes in the global economy. That has to be accepted as perhaps without demand. Now, the rise of the global south, therefore, and other geopolitical changes, which includes the demise of colonialism and the recognition of human rights and self-determination and so on and so forth. Now, if we look around us, the current arrangement and governance of international financial institutions was created almost 80 years ago. 80 years ago. Now, do you really seriously think that an 80-year-old could really deliver the goods for a 25-year-old? Now, at a UN conference, at that time with 44 delegations present, just 44. Right? Now, compare that with today's scenario, with 190 members of the IMF and the World Bank. So you will appreciate that notwithstanding repeated commitments to meaningfully adapting the systems, the pleas of developing countries to international financial institutions, regional development banks, and the rating agencies have remained unheard. They have ears, but they choose not to hear. In the international finance arena, the financial stability of developing nations have remained largely unchanged. And in the recent years, I may not be wrong to go so far as to say that it has gone from bad, perhaps, to worse. Now, against that background, it will not be an exaggeration for me to say that governments of the large developed countries continue to hold a veto in the decision-making process of the international financial institutions, and any changes to voting rights of those institutions. So what say does the Southern Hemisphere have in it? So it is my considered view, therefore, that the sharing of the resources of the Southern Hemisphere within the nations of the Southern Hemisphere or through triangular cooperation can make a difference by the fact that nations in the Southern Hemisphere would be less dependent on the Bretton Woods institutions, or for that matter, at the least, be able to sensitize these institutions that countries of the global south should be assessed on a scale perhaps beyond GDP. Now, an example of this would be recently we had the bilateral cooperation between our Asian neighbors, India and Bangladesh, with Sri Lanka, in which transactions we were able to enjoy great accommodation, generous accommodation, very comfortable accommodation. So how can then, to summarize it, how can the debt restructuring process be assisted to by South-South cooperation? I say the corporation can work with the debtor to develop a new payment plan that is perhaps more manageable based on their financial competencies. Firstly, you have great clout. Secondly, you have the capacity to negotiate with creditors. South-South Corporation can negotiate with creditors on a debtor's behalf to reduce the total, to mitigate the total debt, or to more favorable terms. In other words, you can be the intermediary, the intercessor, so to speak. Thirdly, you have the expertise and the competency to provide financial counseling. And why not? Right? So the corporation can offer financial counseling services to debtors, helping us to develop our budgets, prioritize our expenses, manage our finances more effectively. Thirdly, you can certainly help, you have the ability to intercede and move that the debt be forgiven or reduced, right? After all, it's always good to have an intercessor. And for southern countries of the southern hemisphere, what better intercessor can there be than South-South, the mechanism itself, right? Then you have the capacity to offer debt consolidation on loans. The corporation can provide debt consolidation loans to debtors, allowing countries like Sri Lanka to combine multiple debts into a single loan with lower interest rates and more manageable monthly payments. And finally, perhaps you can give advocacy and support. South-South Corporation can act as an advocate for debtors, helping us to navigate the debt relief process and providing support throughout the repayment period. So in short, you have a complete formula, perhaps, that can be effectively mobilized in helping countries such as ourselves in the debt restructuring process. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Thank you very much, Ambassador, for sharing with us very concrete, action-oriented on the how, right? But not only, but in giving us examples on how this has been working for Sri Lanka. We definitely take note of that. And this is why we say it's extremely important that the UN system gets activated in terms of, working nationally with the different partners, private sector, civil society, and governments to look into these solutions. And this is what we want to, ultimately aim at by anchoring South-South into the national development planning through the country frame. But we take note of that, especially in terms also of the capacity building, food for thought for us also as the South-South office as we move forward, but also for the UN system as we roll out the guidelines and as we also convey that to the different entities on the ground. Thank you very much. So with this, we come to a conclusion of the different interventions, but it's also the time to open the floor for any inquisitive minds. Yes, Ambassador, thank you for joining us today. And
thank you. I can speak without the mic.
We have a mic for you.
Hello. Oh, thank you. Yes, I guess you hear me. I would like to thank for holding this event. We definitely, as a vice chair of the South-South Cooperation High-Level Committee, I'm happy to be here to listen to these guidelines, and we are also trying to spread these parameters of cooperation. I just wanted to highlight that Russia, we spoke about our national efforts. Just one example is that exactly within the mindset of what is happening here, what is promoted here is that we assisted in recovery of Cuban plants which are dealing with food and fertilizers, so that Cuban companies could do South-South cooperation. So And also, I would like to support the main thesis today about training and education. Russia is also increasing the quota for foreign students from developing countries to 30,000 students this year, per year. So we think that education is one of the best venues. So we're also looking at other modes of cooperation in the framework of South-South modalities with the South-South cooperation entity. And we would like to celebrate the event today. You know that we have, I calculated, it's about 234 side events for this HLPF 2 weeks. So I think yours is one of the very popular and very demand. Of course, we echo what you told about decreasing dependency from Bretton Woods institutions. That is the only way to proceed. Otherwise, the principal shift will not take place. Thank you very much for your attention.
You want? Yes, please. I want to thank His Excellency for his intervention and for sharing with us the support to Cuba, but also on the education front. This is extremely important, and thank you for regularly expressing the interest of collaborating on South-South. Yes, please, others. Dinesh, I did not see that you were here. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Madam Dima, Excellency Ambassador Mohan Pierce, and thank you for organizing this. I have nothing much to add to what Mr. Shomisha has already said, but it's just that, you know, India always believes that its own development is inseparable from the rest of the world. So that is why we place much emphasis on South-South cooperation. And in fact, as Mr. Shah was saying, that our G20 presidency motto is one future, one earth, one family. So the unique feature of the India UNDP fund, which he was mentioning, is that this is the first ever single country initiative at the United Nations, and it's a demand-driven country priority project, and emphasis is placed on the leadership, capacity building, sustainable development, and projects which touch the lives of the community. And we are happy that we could partner with the UNOSSE on this, and in a short span of 5 years, we could able to support 66. Now I think 5, 6 are pending, so almost 71 projects across 56, 60 countries have been benefited. And similarly, IPSA fund. So in a, since it came into operation in 2006, it has supported nearly 42 projects across 36 countries. So, I mean, apart from that, I mean, if we speak about South-South cooperation, which is so important because every country is unique and has something to share. India has been training through its ITEC program, Indian Technology and Economic Cooperation Program, and it has imparted training to people from 160 countries, and lines of credit to Global South worth 31 billion has been given. So we continue to believe in Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, as we say in India, again, one earth, one future, one family. So we are very glad that we are part of the UN Office for South-South Cooperation, and we look forward to further strengthening this partnership. Thank you again.
Thank you, Dinesh. This is, I mean, what can we say more? India is part of the family, and thank you for sharing with us those additional information also on the G20 presidency and the provision of training. I mean, it goes without saying, this is a long-term partnership, very impactful and very powerful one. Thank you very much for the partnership. Yes, we have more questions. Yes, please.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Juliet Braslow. I'm with ESCAP from Asia and the Pacific. And good afternoon, Your Excellency, Madam Dima. Thank you for this informative session and the many examples that were shared. I'd like to also add one and congratulate colleagues from Sri Lanka on the hard work and commitment that they demonstrated during the SCAP Voluntary National Review Twinning Program during the last VNR cycle, during which Sri Lanka partnered with Pakistan for the preparation of their second voluntary national review and the study tour of Sri Lankan delegates to Pakistan. And it was a tremendous success that paved the way for a stronger collaboration, really going beyond the delivery of the VNR itself to demonstrating the true spirit of South-South cooperation. And through this study tour and many other virtual interactions, the two countries were able to give constructive feedback on each other's drafts of the VNRs and continue to collaborate. And the twinning units, the VNR units of Sri Lanka and Pakistan, reinforce the importance of establishing resilient institutions and really monitoring progress towards the SDGs that could withstand political change as well. And as Sri Lanka remarked at the 10th Asia Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development held in Bangkok in March, on the SCAP twinning program, it really has provided the opportunity to learn firsthand about different kinds of institutional mechanisms that can foster great political oversight of the SDGs. And as we all know, voluntary national reviews are not just a series of reports, but rather a step in the follow-up and review mechanism. And at SCAP, we believe in facilitating really practical peer learning among countries to help steer and motivate towards the commitment to sustainable development. So we welcome continued collaboration with the government of Sri Lanka and the Office of South-South Collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's an opportunity to showcase a good collaboration, but also to invite you all for our other side event on the launch of the handbook of the National Voluntary Reviews, whereby we're working closely with DESA also to anchor South-South in the reporting mechanism. Thank you very much. I've been notified that we are 10 minutes over. I didn't even feel the time. There are more questions. Yes. I mean, if people are happy to stay, we're happy. Yeah. So yes,
Hi,
please.
sorry, I just wanted to take the floor. It's not really a question, but to thank you, Your Excellency, to thank you, Ms. Dima and your office, and also the DCO. And of course, special thanks to Ms. Rita Colombia, who's our RC interim in Saudi Arabia. I think she touched a little bit on, our Vision 2030, which is a blueprint for transformation in Saudi Arabia. But we do take pride in all of the efforts that we do on South-South cooperation, which she said is cross-cutting. It's not only being a leader in ODA and humanitarian assistance. I believe it goes in terms of development projects in developing countries in different areas, whether it's environment, digital, energy, and all of that. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank you. And I know that from our point of view, collaboration is always important. We put great emphasis on South-South cooperation, great emphasis on our relations with developing countries. And I hope that we can take this further. And I know that the team in the UN are doing a great work as well in Capital. I will take this opportunity as well to invite you to the exhibition, the line exhibition, which is we're doing it on margins of HLPF. And we do have our VNR, our second VNR coming up on the 19th. And I think an aspect of what we've discussed here will be shown through that session. So I welcome you all and thank you again.
Thank you very much, Reem. Thank you for the acknowledgement and for all the good work. We have a colleague who has been raising his hand, please. Sorry for that. We were been prioritizing the ladies.
I completely understand. No, thank you very much. And indeed, I think the guidelines are very important and indeed a right tool in the right direction to really try to see how this agenda gets domesticated within the UN system. Two things. One, what we need with the guidelines is also to look at the whole society approach. How do you plan to engage with civil society and other non-state actors, because they also can contribute and they should contribute to the South-South cooperation agenda. And I think looking at the bigger picture would be a very good addition to the process. And in the same context, really, because civil society generates a lot of research on impact of South-South cooperation. So how we're able to tap into that could also contribute to the agenda. Lastly, I really welcome the ambassador's suggestions on how South-South cooperation can contribute to addressing the debt crisis. And I think one of the things, I'm from Africa, and we are grappling with debts from our Southern comrades. So I think, and addressing sovereign debt starts from the political process before it moves to the technical. And so if we can also use this platform to discuss politically how we can restructure the debts that are owed to the Southern comrades, that would be much appreciated. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much for making the point. Two things. I mean, on the whole of a society approach, I agree in terms of the engagement. I mean, this is extremely important to bring the different dimension into the mix. And this is something that, you know, is at the heart of how development cooperation frameworks are put into place. They are developed on a basis of heavy consultations. And here I'm talking about the country's level and the regional level. On your second point, I mean, definitely sharing experiences, technical but not political from our side. So that would be definitely more than welcome, more than happy that we capture this experience and we share it on our different platforms. Any other questions? Our colleagues from IAEA, thank you.
Thank you very much. Not a question, but just again, I mean, a thanks to the ambassador and to Director Al-Khatib for putting together this event today, and to Dennis also for the guidelines, because I think that this is something that is really needed. We hear so much talking about putting down the silos also within the UN system. And I think that the more we are moving forward, the more we see that this is now happening. And I think that we can all be very proud of this. From our side as well, I think we are definitely continue supporting your work and supporting, of course, all our member states. And I think that Dennis highlighted something that is very important. Often we are still, we realize more and more that a lot of the initiatives that we are undertaking have a very strong element of South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation, but we don't refer to it in that way. And for us, especially in the IAEA, this is true when we are talking about developments and all the capacity building in agriculture, food security, food safety, health, and so on and so forth. So I think they count on us on trying to make sure that we capture more the South-South cooperation aspects. And as well, I think we are very interested also in taking part to this effort in trying to monitoring and assessing what are actually the impacts, as other colleagues also have underlined today, of all the work that is done with South-South, because we know how difficult it is. We are always very engaged in implementing. And then when it's time to assessing, it's becoming more difficult. So thank you very much for putting together this event.
Thank you. And thank you for your proactiveness. I mean, IAEA has a lot to offer. A lot goes untold or unbranded, but I'm sure that there's more to come. And we really hope that we will forge partnerships on the guidelines. We'll take your word for that. And in terms of measuring the impact. I do have additional words from His Excellencies on.
Bear with me and grant me the indulgence of saying a few words on the South Center, how Sri Lanka has benefited from the work of the South Center. Now, a good example perhaps is a current problem that we have, example of cooperation between Sri Lanka and the South Center, supported by the UNDP, is the manner in which Sri Lanka seeks to address the call from the IMF to withdraw its taxes on online digital trading. Now, there is a huge powwow going on as to whether we should withdraw or not. Now, in our budget in 2021, we imposed a 0.3% levy on the total transactions made online on online trading platforms. Now, it is thought that this may deter potential investors and could discourage the growth of online trading and hinder development and so on and so forth. So we've been asked to reconsider the imposition of this tax and to instead engage in a comprehensive domestic tax reform program. So we've had great support in responding to it through the South Center, from the South Center. So the South Center, which is, as you know, an intergovernmental organization of developing countries, has expressed a view, which I say is fairly perhaps the persuasive, so to speak, that the view that the pressure brought upon Sri Lanka, they came to our aid, so to speak, is misguided and may have negative consequences for the country. They didn't mince their words about it. And that Sri Lanka's decision to impose the tax on online trading was a legitimate means for governments to generate revenue and address socioeconomic imbalances. So it has also been observed that by pressuring us in the way it was thought to be done, it may hinder the country's effort to address the socioeconomic problems that we actually have. So the view has been expressed by the South Center that the global financial institutions should focus on assisting Sri Lanka in developing sustainable and equitable revenue generation mechanisms. And the center goes on to emphasize the position and highlight the importance of considering local circumstances, and prioritizing inclusive growth when formulating economic policies. In other words, we know best what is good for us. Surely a mother and father would know best what is best for his home or her home. It's a simple, very, very rudimentary principle. The best, we say, is therefore understood by our southern partners. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is quite powerful. And as I said, we would like to capture that experience as one of the best practices, so also other countries could learn from the experience of Sri Lanka. I think we're quite over time, but that speaks loads to the interest, right? And really very glad that everybody had the chance to participate today. We're looking very much forward to continuing this collaboration with all of you as we roll out the guidelines, as we work closer with the UN country teams. But thank you very much for your participation today. There's a lot of key messages that came out of this discussion. I mean, other than underpinning the importance of South-South, the South-led solutions as illustrated by the example of Sri Lanka, but also by the examples of the different resident coordinators who were with us, the solidarity principle that drives South-South cooperation, extremely important, and we have to remind ourselves. Someone who mentioned at the beginning that there is a lot with this mandate of South-South cooperation and triangular cooperation, there should be a lot of enthusiasm and commitment and, you know, wanting really to pursue that. So thank you. I think it's in every one of us. We look forward to continuing this discussion, and we invite you all to our other side events on the launch of the handbook on the national voluntary reviews and monitoring and measuring, you know, South-South. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for the colleagues online. Are they still online? Yes, Simona, Esteli, Rita, thank you so much. I'm sorry to keep you late.
It's my pleasure. Thank you, Dima. Thank you. Great discussion. Thank you so
Great,
much.
great to see you both. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.